assume you can hear me. Could you? Yes. Okay. So I'm going to call this meeting together to order at 6:40. I apologize for the delay. Due to the Proclamation 2028 prohibiting removal of meeting act, such as the Planning Policy Commission, from being conducted in person, tonight's meeting will be held entirely remotely. But before we begin, I'd like to provide some virtual meeting guidelines. So commissioners, please use your chat to indicate a desire to speak by typing question or comment, then wait to be acknowledged. Please do not put any substantive comments in the chat. And for any commissioners on the phone, like me, we will intermittently check in with you if you have comments. And if you do, you can hit *3 to raise your hand. For all meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently. State your name each time before speaking. Mute your microphone when not speaking. And for those joining us by video, your microphone is muted when it is orange. Obviously, you know that. Use the call-in information invite to call into the meeting if you have technical difficulties, which I apologize, I did. Now we'll begin by taking a roll call of the commissioners in attendance. If you would unmute your and answer here when I call your name. Janice Carley?
Here.
Ron Fowle?
Here.
Randy Harrison is excused. Joy Lewis?
Here.
Bill Reinhardt?
I'm sorry, Joan, excuse me. I believe Randy's on the call with us tonight.
Oh, good.
So let me find him real quickly so I can unmute him. And I'm sorry, it appears that he may have dropped off the call. So disregard, sorry for the interruption.
Well, if he comes back on, he can let us know. Joy Lewis?
Here.
Bill Reinhardt? Bill is not on the phone?
Joan, Bill had a late arriving excused absence.
Okay. Jason Voss?
It's pronounced voice, but I'm here.
Voice, okay. And Robin Bucher? Say here. You're okay. Robin is here.
Can you not hear me?
Well, I can now. I couldn't before.
I'm here now.
Okay, good. So tonight we have a full house of helpers to explain everything that's going on tonight. So we have Senior Planner Kristen Reeson, Assistant Planner Doug Yormick, Environmental and Regulatory Program Administrator Evan Brumfield, Robin York, Utilities Engineering Manager, Deputy City Clerk Tisha Geiser, I think I pronounced that right, Recording Secretary Susan Miller. Is Susan here?
Yes, Susan's here.
Is there any objection to approval of the February 6th and February 12th minutes provided in the agenda? Does anybody have any objection? If there are no objections, the minutes are approved.
Hey, Joan, can I interrupt you for a second? When you're
Sure.
speaking, you're moving your hand, and sometimes it muffles the sound.
Okay. How about if I just put the phone down? Can you hear me now? Okay. So tonight we're going to have two discussions. The first one is a proposed amendment to the
Joan, this is Tish. Joan, this is Tisha. It is now harder to hear you.
What?
It's harder to hear you with the phone on the table. It was better held to your ear.
Oh, yeah, it's fine. Okay, this is a new experience. So, tonight we're going to have two areas of discussion. I'm going to teach you another area. I have a presentation, and then we are going to introduce.
I'm unable to hear Joan at all.
Yeah.
Can anybody? Yes.
Oh, okay. Now that's better. We need it real close to your mouth to hear you clearly.
Okay. I apologize. So we're going to begin tonight with a staff presentation from Evan Brumfield. I understand that normally when we are in the meeting room that we're able to do a lot of interruptions and asking questions. Well, we're going to let Evan finish his presentation, and then you guys can have all the questions that you want. I think it would be easier to do it that way. So I'm going to open up the presentation to Evan and let him talk about what's going on. Evan, are you ready?
Evan, we're not able to hear you right now. Evan? Okay, you can hear us, I see, but we can't hear you.
You're having the same problem I did.
Try going down to the buttons at the bottom of your screen, the one with the 3 dots, going to speaker microphone. See if you can make your selection there. We still can't hear you, Evan. No. Evan, you might want to try unplugging your headset or rejoining, or you can call in like Joan did. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. Obviously, this is a new thing for us.
How about if I just unplug? Can you hear me if I just unplug?
Yes.
Okay, we'll try it that way instead of calling in. Okay, so let me see now. Share my screen again. Is that good? You guys see it now?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Let me go back though now because I was clicking buttons here. All right, so hi, my name is Evan Brumfield. I'm an Environmental and Regulatory Program Administrator here for the City of Issaquah. I work in Public Works Engineering, and I am, some of my job duties, I'm the city's coordinator for our NPDES stormwater permit, as well as our Community Rating System or CRS program coordinator, which is a floodplain program in addition to our kind of requirements that we'll be going over tonight. As well, in addition to those duties, I work with local businesses on pollution prevention, fat cellulose and grease with restaurants, wellhead protection in our cities for our businesses that are located in our critical aquifer recharge area, and stormwater infrastructure maintenance. So why are we here tonight? The city received a letter from FEMA dated February 19th, 2020. In that letter, they stated that there was finalized flood insurance rate maps, or FIRMs, and flood insurance studies for King County. A flood insurance rate map is essentially, it's the official mapped floodplain according to FEMA, and the previous iteration that we've been using was from 2005. And a flood insurance study, what they do is it's basically a study that investigates the existence and severity of flood hazards in the geographic area of King County. And again, that was 2005 on the previous iteration of that too. And so, according to the National Flood Insurance Act of 1968, the city is required to adopt these new FIRMs and FIS report within 6 months from the date of us receiving that letter, which gives us a deadline of August 19th of 2020. So we're also here because we want to ensure that we maintain compliance with our national flood insurance program. And to do that, we need to adopt or show evidence of adoption of a floodplain management regulations that meet the standards of paragraph 60.3D of the NFIP regulation. NFIP is the National Flood Insurance Program. In that section, it talks about floodplain management criteria for the flood-prone areas. One thing to note is that the city isn't alone in these required code amendments. There's close to 300 towns, cities, counties, and tribes in the state of Washington that are going through this process right now. Early on, we were coordinating a lot with the city of Bellevue. So basically, any of our neighbors that have a floodplain, they are going through this at the exact same moment as us with the same exact deadline. And we're here to recommend the acceptance of the code amendments as presented. That's very essential to maintaining our compliance with the NFIP. But we also don't want to close the book on these code amendments for future floodplain recommendations or changes or anything like that. That is no way what this presentation and why we're here is just to open and shut the book on these code changes. So if there is a desire from the community, county, and the city administration to be more restrictive in our flood code, then that is definitely something that can be addressed later. But just due to these time constraints from FEMA of this 6-month window, it's just not, and we're in the middle of a pandemic, just not able to happen at this time. The National Flood Insurance Program. This program aims to reduce the impact of flooding on private and public structures. It does so by providing affordable insurance to property owners, renters, and businesses, and by encouraging communities to adopt and enforce floodplain management regulations. These efforts help mitigate the effects of flooding on new and improved structures. Overall, the program reduces the socio-economic impact of disasters by promoting the purchase and retention of general risk insurance, but also of flood insurance specifically. And so why do we want to be in compliance with the NFIP? It's because we want our citizens and businesses to continue to have flood insurance eligible for them that are when they're located in the floodplain. And with that compliance with the NFIP comes our community rating system participation, which is our CRS program, which is a voluntary program that we are a part of, where we go above and beyond the requirements of NFIP in order to get multiple things, but one of the things we get back is a 25% rate discount for our citizens, and that is due to the programs that we have in the city currently. We're called a Class 5 city. Out of, I think the highest is 9, the lowest is 1. You want low, the lower the class, the more discount you get. There is only one Class 1 city in the entire nation, and it's in California. So it's pretty hard to get down to a Class 1, but we are. There's no other city located in King County that has a higher classification classification than us. So it's really something that we're proud of, and there are other cities that are Class 5 as well, but yeah, it's just something that we work hard at. And then we want to continue to be eligible for grants for our flood control projects. A lot of times these flood control projects, they get paired up with salmon enhancement projects, and we want to be able to continue to have eligibility for grants to go after these projects. A couple examples of these projects where we kind of combined flood control and salmon enhancement was the Salmon Run Nature Park and Confluence Park as well. So how did we get here where we're at right now? Like I said, we received that letter from FEMA dated February 19th. And then in early March, Ecology provided us with two things. One, the Washington Model Ordinance, which in that model ordinance, it included standards of federal, state, and local floodplain management requirements. Then they also included an Issaquah Municipal Code review. So in that, they detailed amendments to our existing code, which encompassed all the federal, state, and local requirements. So after those two documents, we were given three options basically to adopt these new and revised standards. Number one was amending the existing regulations to incorporate any additional requirements. Number two was adopting all of the standards in the Washington Model Ordinance into one new comprehensive set of regulations, which is kind of have changed our structure of how our code is. Or number three, which was showing evidence that regulations have previously been adopted that meet or exceed these minimum requirements. The city, we chose to go with option one, amending our Issaquah Municipal Code 1636, areas of special flood hazard. So after we decided to amend our Issaquah Municipal Code, we started finalizing the code. And with that, we had various meetings with Ecology, our state floodplain coordinator, who's responsible for us. His name's Dave Radabaugh, and we also met with our city attorney to come up with more of a collaborative approach to these code amendments. So these amendments that are being presented are both approved by Ecology and our city attorney. So once we completed the code, we completed the SEPA checklist, which our Public Works Department completed, and then we submitted that to our Development Services Department, which issued a preliminary determination of non-significance. And after all this, DSD also handled the public notification process for both the SEPA and for this public hearing. So what do these code amendments do for the city? These amendments make our code more prescriptive through two ways: mandatory code amendments and non-mandatory code amendments. So these mandatory code amendments, they are the basic minimum federal and state regulation requirements that must be contained in our local flood regulations. This is what we need to do to continue to be compliant with NFIP. The non-mandatory code amendments are where the city, us, has elected to be more prescriptive than the basic minimum requirements. These non-mandatory code amendments were recommendations provided to us from both FEMA and Ecology as well. So some examples of these non-mandatory code additions. Actually, these are all of the examples. There's 4 lines of code where we elected to be more prescriptive. The first one is in 1636-110B, and it's the permit application. Of note in this is the use of elevation certificates. In that the language in the code as it is required, but our enhancement of needing an elevation certificate was is to be more stringent in our code. Typically, the elevation certificates have lived in our community rating, our CRS program. That's a requirement in that program, but FEMA and Ecology thought it was relevant to move it over into this line of code as well. And us. So the next line, 1636-120L, general standards, changes to the special flood hazard area. This requires a project that if they alter the base flood elevation or boundaries of the special flood hazard area, which is the 100-year flood, the mapped 100-year flood area, then an approved conditional letter of map revision is required prior to the approval of the development permit. So when you hear map revision, that revision is of the firm maps, the flood insurance rate maps, which is that what FEMA has determined to be our mapped floodplain. The next line of code is 1636-120M, general standards, storage of materials and equipment. And that line of code prohibits storage and processing of materials that could injure human, animal, or plant life if released due to damage from flooding. And then the final one was 1636-130J, and that's specific standards section, and it's under appurtenant structures. So this is mainly for detached garages or small storage structures. And in this section, it defines how those structures can be used and if they need to be constructed, how they need to be constructed in order to continue to be in the floodplain. So recommendations and next steps. We, the staff, the city desires that the PPC recommends that council approve these proposed amendments as presented in order for us to continue to be compliant with the NFIP, considering all our time constraints and us in this pandemic. We're lucky that we were able to get what we've accomplished so far. But then that's not to say that potentially, in the future, that there is a potential for more restrictive code amendments with public input. So we started this amendment process back in March, early April. We started this as a complete code rewrite, and this process would have included significant public input. However, when COVID impacts and shutdowns occurred, we had to shift our focus to doing the required changes, and that's it, in order for us to continue to be compliant. We felt that in the middle of a pandemic, it wasn't the right time to ask the community for feedback for a flood code change. Like I said before, with all that said, if there is interest in the community, council, and city leadership to be more restrictive in our floodplain and code after these code amendments get approved, then I say let's do it. I mean, I think that's a really, we want to protect the environment, and that's something that I know that the community definitely has an interest in making our flood code more restrictive, and I think that's something that can definitely be accomplished after these code amendments get approved. So that's all I have.
The commissioner.
Joan, this is Deputy City Clerk Tisha. Can you please repeat that? You were muted for a portion.
I'm trying. I see a bunch of questions now in the chat box, and we'll start with Janice.
This is Janice. No, I didn't have any questions.
Okay, we're just coming up with participants. Are there any questions?
This is Ron. I posted a question in the chat box.
I hit the chat box and nothing. Oh, there you are. Question from Ron. Go for it.
All right. So, Evan, I've got a question concerning the intersection of Front Street and 229th Avenue Southeast. So we just did a significant amount of restoration for the salmon-bearing stream in that area. And when reading the code 1636-130, I don't know if that's the right place for this question, but it made me think of it. How would a dealership be able to safely meet the requirements for hazardous waste and hazardous contents in the event that they are flooded? Because you have so many vehicles there. You have oil, you have hydraulic lifts for the auto repairs, and it just seems like that would be a difficult task to meet any kind of requirements for environmental protection because of all those hazardous chemicals that are not mobile. Does that make sense? What would that story look like, and how would they be able to meet that?
I mean, that would be, so that's been all handled through our development services department through permit review and all that. So that would be handled in the stages of permit review. And we have a flood hazard permit process. And in that, there's certain requirements that they need to meet as part of that permitting process.
So then that would not be part of this discussion tonight. That would be part of a different discussion.
Yeah, correct. I don't do the permit review for these for any site that's, or for any project that's going to happen in our floodplain. The open discussion tonight is for more of these code amendments, and if there's or the public hearing is for these code amendments.
Okay. And I have one other question regarding section 1636-115, section E5. And when that was referring to, let me get to that, 1636-15. I'm trying to find it here so I can actually read to it.
Which code section is that again?
1636-115.
Okay. It's the permit fees section?
Yes, section E. Number 5 says where base flood elevation data has not been provided or is not available from another authoritative source, it shall be generated by the applicant. So shouldn't that be, or should we consider something like a calibrated altimeter or a GPS location to identify what the elevation is of that, as opposed to just having the party come up with their own figures? Because we're further on, we're talking about discounts and things like that, where if it's less than 1 foot below grade, there would be a discount. So that kind of leaves it, if they're within that area of margin, they could punch numbers kind of thing, right? So they could just approximate what that would be. But wouldn't we want to use something more scientific like an altimeter or a GPS location?
So what I can is, so you're talking about, so you're not on 115, you're actually on 120, I believe, under the general standards. Is that correct? Under development proposals?
Yes.
E5?
Okay. Yes, you are right. It's under 120.
Okay. And so can you please repeat your question again? So where base flood elevation data has been provided or is not available from another authoritative source, it shall be generated by the applicant for development proposals or other proposed developments which contain at least 2 lots or 2 acres, whichever is lesser. That's what your comment is on?
Right. Yes. So isn't that a little ambiguous? If we're leaving the finding of fact to the applicant to determine, as opposed to a scientific measurement such as a GPS location or a use of an calibrated altimeter confirmed by a city official?
Yes, and so what I can say with that is that if it differs, there would have to be a kind of that Clomer process that we talked about that I mentioned in my presentation, and I guess I can't really speak to. I can tell you that we would require a survey. It wouldn't just be lick your thumb and stick it up and see which way the wind is blowing. It would be a official survey of the lot.
Okay.
And
That
I
would
don't know
make
if,
sense then.
yeah,
Uh,
if that answers your question.
It does.
Okay.
Okay, the next person is Jason, but I want to remind all of you in the future that you should only put in question or comment. Any of the dialogue that comes through needs to be in open forum. So if you have any comment, please just write in comment and I will give you a call. So Jason, what is your question?
So I had more of a comment, but thank you, Madam Chair. It's good to see everybody again. It's good to see everybody from the comfort of my home. But I just wanted to reiterate something that I saw in the literature, and I believe Mr. Broomfield and the city staff are trying to make a point not only to my colleagues on the commission, but also to everyone who's watching, is that we can come back and fine tune this. What the city's trying to do right now is to adopt the requirements, as well as in a few areas, like Mr. Broomfield said, taking some non-mandatory steps to even go above and beyond. But the idea is we only have a few months before our time requirement lapses. And I think it's important to note the reason we don't want it to lapse and we don't want to struggle with words at the moment is because our small businesses get an insurance reduction and our homeowners as well. And I think we all know how much they're struggling right now. So I think the idea, and Mr. Broomfield said it very well, is we can always come back, debate the particulars of this entire code amendment, but because of the time constraints and because of our August 29th deadline, this might not be the time to start going over verbiage as much. I know that the city is already taking what they're adopting from FEMA, and like I said, in a few different areas, it seems like they're even going a little bit above and beyond. So I just wanted to reiterate that for the audience. It's not that we're trying to rush anything through. It's not that we're trying to pass something without the public seeing it. It's more or less we're trying to make sure that we keep those rates for people, especially right now when people are still struggling. So that's my piece. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So the next one in the chat is a question from Commissioner Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was a perfect lead-in for me, actually, because I want to go specifically. I have a couple comments, but I'm going to save them for after the public has a chance to. So I do have 3 questions, but one of them goes to the fact that I'd like to specifically be addressed is if there has been an actual allocation of resources to have this be readdressed. While Mr. Broomfield, I love your enthusiasm. When I sent you a message, you communicated that same intent to me about being able to revisit it. But I think that it would be nice to hear that more than our desire to be able to finance this, that there's actually been a directive of resources to say, yes, we realize this isn't being done how we want right now, but this is the concrete plan to be able to give that input, to do the rewrites that we would have liked prior to us all adjusting our schedules and timetables. Do you have any concrete information on that, or is this again more your individual perception or desire?
Well, I mean, of course I have my individual perception, but I mean, so all these comments came in over the last couple of days, and so we do not currently have anything as a city as far as budget prioritized for code amendments or anything like that, because we honestly didn't really know that this was potentially a problem as far as in regards to our floodplain kind of issues. At least it got brought to my attention. So if that's why I mentioned if this is something that the community, which I know it sounds like the community wants, then that's a discussion with both our council and senior leadership, city leadership to move forward with that.
Thank you for clarifying that. I know that right now Rivers and Streams board is being defunct and replaced. Obviously, that's a process they're going through right now. But regardless of my opinions of that and the comments that I've made to our city administrator about it, I am curious if they have had eyes on this at all. This obviously deals with our riparian issues. Have they since March been able to have eyes on this and give feedback?
No, they have not. But in the future, the environmental board, I mean, this will be right up their alley that we will be taking it to them and be well within their scope to review.
My other question for you was, in all of the stuff I was reviewing, I was seeing 100-year flood, but verbally you mentioned a 200-year flood. Is that a different classification that I missed, or was that just a misspoken?
Yeah, if I mentioned a 200-year flood, that was I misspoke there. It's 100-year flood.
Okay, I thought maybe there was a super duper thing that I missed.
I mean, we've experienced 2 100-year floods, so it's 200-year flood, right?
Oh, thank you. Okay, then maybe that's what it was. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to leave off my any other comments for after we deal with the public. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So with that, I would like to ask Commissioner Buchers if he would, if he had a question or a comment.
I think comments just made by Mr. Joy and the responses satisfied me. My overriding concern here, having read all the public comments, is some very prescient, and I think that I would like to see us, whatever we do here, in terms of approving or not the proposal, that we not leave this as open-ended avenue for further discussion of the points raised, because I think some of them are very serious and worthy of further deliberation. So I'll leave that as my comment. Thank you very much.
Is there anybody else that would like to ask a question or make a comment? Hearing none, I would like to make a comment. I thank you, Evan, for the presentation. I think it was well thought out, and the way you presented it was very, very good. I have this thing about flood insurance that I know, after working with the realtors for 5 or 6 years on this particular subject, and even going to DC and talking to Congress, the value of flood insurance. And I would really hate to see something cause us not to be able to have it for the city. I think we have a date of August the 19th to be able to prove that we have our ducks in a row and we have accepted this form. I'm pleased that it's not only what FEMA wanted, but it is extra. And I'm always interested in having that extra little bit. And I'm sure that there are bits and pieces of this that might or will be changed and become more restrictive. But I think with the COVID problems that the city is facing, I think that having done as much as they've done on this has been really good work, and I pat the staff on the back for doing the work, for doing this. I also know that Issaquah is a very unique place. Yes, we have a floodplain, but most other places don't have many creeks that are full of salmon or are surrounded by hills where there's a lot of water runoff. And so I think that we need to look in the future and see what we can do with these things. I understand that there is an environmental commission that is in the process of being formed, and I'm hoping that on that commission the city puts on people who are knowledgeable about ecology and water rights and all the things that go into making a good plan. But since I don't see any more questions, I'm going to open the public hearing at 7:20. And for the members of the public joining us tonight to make comments, when recognized, please unmute your microphone. If you're on the phone, *6 might be an option. State your name, address, and relationship to the city. Speak clearly and pause frequently. Limit comments to 5 minutes, and then remute your microphone when done. If you do not respond after your name or phone number is called, or if your connection is lost unexpectedly, the meeting will need to proceed. You are encouraged to rejoin the meeting if you are able. For those who have joined us tonight and would like to speak but did not sign up in advance, please press *3 on your phone and we will call the first 6 digits of your phone number when it is your turn to make comments. So Doug, would you please announce the first speaker?
And Madam Chair, this is Deputy City Clerk Tisha filling in for Doug. And our first speaker is Connie Marsh. Connie, I'm unmuting you now.
Well, I don't think you unmuted me, but maybe now. You didn't unmute me, but I unmuted myself.
We can hear you now.
Perfect. So I have a question first. You have 2 public hearing times. You have this, and then you have the one later on. So can I please be on that second list, because the format didn't allow me to choose to be on that secondary public speaking list. Okay, so now let's move on to flood hazard permit. I appreciate you all thinking about this topic, and I'm sure you got my emails with lots of water in them. I do understand insurance, and so my issue with putting this particular piece of legislation through boils down to one particular bit of code, and that is when it says that you have to have your FEMA map in place, that says by development permit. But what has happened in the past is when it goes through the process, they, in the new department name, Community Services Department, maybe something like that, has just put a condition down saying that before you start and before we allow your permit to actually go into action, you have to prove that you have gotten this map change. But what that does is that allows the entire process and permit to go through with the community and everything reliant on a future action. So I would like a clarification in this code indicating that you can't just put a condition into the development permit saying, yeah, and later on, you can tell us if you meet the map condition. The map condition needs to be in place in advance of even putting in the application itself, not just for the permit. Because I think we've had 3 of those in the last year where the entire project was basically approved and now they're waiting on the FEMA map changes. And that's just dumb. So one of those things is easy. That was Costco, but the Evergreen Ford parcel that Ron talked about, they actually are reliant upon a FEMA map change in order to be able to develop. And so that was a long, arduous process and difficult for the community that we didn't have to go through until we understood whether they would actually even be able to build in that area because the map would be changed. So that is my argument for changing that piece of code to be more prescriptive. So then the second thing is, Evan said that they were going to go out and do a bunch of public outreach, but they did not. So that means that there was some work product or funding for public outreach. So maybe we have a little bit of money left in our budget. It's unclear. But what we need is a letter from PPC to City Council saying we are willing to let this pass through with a minor change, of course. But we want to be clear that we would like to have this revisited very near term, because last year with 2 significant floods is enough to show us that what we have is not working. And we need to review it and tighten it up in order to make it so fewer places actually need flood insurance, right? Because our goal is not to put the community out of business when we get flooded. And our goal is not to have the fish eggs and the fish washed out and not be able to have a spawning year, which is what happened this last year. And so what I would request is that you all would agree to write such a letter directed to City Council to go with this code amendment and request the funding for it to be put into this next year's budget with a work product. Now, the last topic is the environmental group that is going into place would have this topic, but for the next bit of time, they are just going to be getting on board, and they are not going to be able to caretake the environment for some period of time, like 6 months, maybe 8 months. So in a situation like this, when you're looking at the flood hazard, you guys are going to have to be the drivers because there is no one else, and you can't expect a brand new committee to get on board running. So then the other comments I am going to save until the next public comment period. Thank you.
Tisha, is there anybody else signed up?
No one else is signed up to speak.
I will ask again. Is there anybody else that would like to speak? Hearing none.
And actually, Joan, let me, since we only have one other member of the public on the line, if you don't mind, I can check in with Mr. Pereira to see if he wants to make comments. Steve, I've unmuted your microphone. Were you interested in making comments during the public hearing? And Steve, you may need to unmute your phone as well.
Sorry, I was just unmuting my phone. So I didn't plan on making public comments. I wanted to hear the input. I understand that at this point we just want to move something forward. I would share the concern of us documenting maybe as much as we could what concerns or input folks might want to make on this and have that carry forward to the city council maybe tonight. If that's only tonight, then still have a discussion and forward whatever relevant conversations and document whatever relevant conversations so that they have that as part of the letter that Connie suggested for inclusion as part of that work package. Other than that, I'll reserve the balance of my comments. Thank you. And thank you to the commission members.
Is there anybody else on the phone that would like to make a comment?
Madam Chair, there are no other members of the public on the line.
Okay. Is there any objection to closing the public hearing? Hearing none, the public hearing is closed at 7:29. And I'm going to open this up to further discussion from the commission. And if you have additional questions, please make it known in the chat room. I see a comment from Commissioner Ron Fall. Do you have a comment?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. So I think to Jason's point and to confirm with Joy, I think they're spot on with where we're at in confirming the special flood hazard code amendments. I think we need to table this and have, or pass what we have on to City Council, and ask them to circle back within a period of time, maybe within the next 24 months, because I don't know what's going to happen in the next year, but I think maybe 24 months would be safe. And that way we can go through this and digest it without having COVID hanging over us and hampering our abilities to be able to put something through that also has a adequate community outreach.
I see a question from Commissioner Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Broomfield, I'm curious, as we're so kind of going off of what Ron's saying, what do you think is a realistic time frame for addressing the code beyond the compliance with the NFIP?
Yeah, that would be a discussion with council and how they want to direct our policy decisions on, and it's as simple as that. It's what they choose to prioritize.
Sure. In a non-COVID year, and we were addressing similar code amendments, would you find that it would be typical to do 2 work sessions? We often host these work sessions in our commission meetings. I mean, would you find that if we're doing this kind of work, we often will do different things, like obviously in person, we'll go into the community and do in-person meetings, but I guess what I'm trying to say is a realistic time frame in terms of, like, we would normally think that we would do 2 work sessions on this. We would probably do 1 in the community, 1 in your commissioner. What kind of would you expect to see as far as a time commitment of how many sessions would be used to address, again, the code beyond this compliance with the NFIP?
Yeah, and I guess I'm unsure because I have not gone through, this is my first time going through a full code amendment update, and these were all amendments that were given to us from a regulatory agency. And so that just depends on the extent of the code updates that we would need to do that the public would want. So I cannot answer that, but I can definitely get that information back to you. Or yeah, I mean, I guess I can't answer that question right now.
That's fair. I think what it goes to the heart at is that coming into this, I hate coming into a meeting wanting to be non-compliant. You know, we want to find a way to kind of merge having our best selves and being also able to kind of keep the gears of government going on this commission. And it's hard to come into a meeting feeling stuck. So I think that the comments that that we've heard from the community are saying that they understand the time constraints, but that this isn't adequately addressing some of our needs. And so I'm in favor of being able to put forward something to council of what we think ought to be happening. So that's kind of where I'm coming at as far as trying to have a better understanding of realistic resources. I know Ron just mentioned something of 24 months, but I certainly would like to see something before the close of the year. There's a couple of things that concerned me as far as, like, if we were to be right now sitting in a room going over these code changes, in particular, section 20, 163620 talks about sandbags and how it's completely fine and appropriate, and it's not to be able to have sandbags up for a 6-month duration, and have that not be a change or some sort of, changing your environment. And I would be asking, is that 6 months continuous? And is anyone charting if someone's using sandbags for a 6-month period of time? There's a serious problem going on. This isn't like, hey, we have a storm rolling in for the weekend and I'm trying to shore something up in advance of hearing that it is going to be a more significant thing. And so it concerns me that we're passing through something that's saying, yeah, this is normal and this is fine. But again, we're in a situation where we're saying, well, we kind of want to just push this through, but yet we're not looking at some of these details. Like, I'm curious, like section 120 was another thing that if we're sitting in a room going through this, 1636-120 talks about new buildings needing to be anchored. Is anchoring defined? Right now they mention what anchoring can be, but I didn't see an actual definition that goes back to build standards of what we accept and don't accept that to be. So I'm a little stuck right now between how we move forward by being able to say that we're just subbing in what's been recommended to us and pushing it forward because we have this constraint, when really our constraint is that it's in 5 weeks, even though we've been looking at it for 5 months. What I would like to see is something similar to the TIP, our transportation improvement plan. You sent me a really great document that was the annual floodplain management plan and progress report. And I found that to be great because it was like, oh, we're a quarter of the way there. When you start thinking about the code is addressing a lot of future development. However, we've had issues with previous development contributing and making a lot of situations worse. So how do we actually address what's happening and fixing what's happening currently in our floodplain and with stormwater management? And so what I'd like to see and recommend to council is that this document be expanded in a way that puts together areas of concern, addresses exactly what we think it's going to cost and what it's possible, because obviously in this time of reduced budgets, it's hard to have an expectation of let's get this all fixed before we hit next season. But I think that it is realistic to ask staff, to ask the council to allocate resources to staff to say, let's actually address and have these work sessions to say, what are the issues, where are the issues, and how can they be addressed in a way that to me feels similar to the TIP. And gives people a chance to actually be able to go online and look and say, hey, is this road there? Because we had really great feedback and comments from our citizens who have, recording videos, who have made past comments to staff, and being able to create that space for the community to come together and continue to work on this process. So I don't know how my other commissioners feel about kind of going that step further than not just a recommendation to council to continue this process, but to also create a living and breathing document that addresses stormwater management.
Yeah, and so we're in the process currently of, in Public Works Engineering, of developing a surface and stormwater master plan. It's part of our MPDS requirement over this duration of the 5-year term of the stormwater permit. But in that master plan, that's going to identify a lot of these flooding issues, stormwater management, as well as opportunities for improvement in specific watersheds. So a lot of that will be identified in that surface and stormwater master plan. So there's kind of, there's floodplain, stormwater, critical areas. We're all kind of towing that same line. And that, I think a lot of your answers that you're looking for will be identified in that surface and stormwater master plan. And then with that Title 18 update with critical areas, that'll be another opportunity.
Madam Chair, just to jump in on that, is there a timetable that you're aware of when we can expect that, Mr. Broomfield?
The surface and stormwater master plan? So that is currently, due to the COVID impacts, that is on hold currently right now. We have the initial end date was supposed to be, I believe, next year, like June of next year. We're at a stopping point right now where we have done pretty much the watershed, the Issaquah Creek watershed. So right now we're kind of working with our consultant on the analysis of that watershed and potential opportunities for stormwater and flood improvements.
Thank you.
So I know that Issaquah will never have enough money to complete every single project, and you'll be out there looking for funds from the state, from national. I hope that's included in your report, similar to the TIP, where you can space out where you think you're going to be getting funds into that to accomplish what's in there. I have a question from Commissioner Voice.
Perfect, Madam Chair. So real quickly, I think Commissioner Lewis gave an illustrative, perfect example of what Ms. Marsh and I think fellow citizens are probably really concerned about as far as the sandbag analogy. I think that's great. And I do think it is a major concern, and why it's appropriate that we come back to this as soon as possible. to Commissioner Fowle's point, which I also agree with, is a timeline would be nice for us to set for the city and for ourselves to come back to this. It is definitely an important issue. And to Ms. Marsh's point, last year we had some major flooding. So I don't know what we can do as far as tweaking Ms. Marsh's original concern about as far as the maps without basically not being able to follow basically what we need to get done in 5 weeks. Having said that, though, I do like the idea of sending council a letter letting her know that the Planning Policy Commission, if other commissioners feel this way, would like to see this come back, and let them know our deep concerns about passing something like this. And ultimately, we're trying to do it because of the pandemic that we're all in, trying to make sure this gets across the line in appropriate and timely fashion. But again, setting a timeline, letting council know where we stand. We'd like to see this come back. Again, I love the illustrative example that Commissioner Lewis gave. I don't know if everybody else feels like that, but again, a strong letter to the council letting them know this is an imperfect situation due to the pandemic. Let's see this thing come back and maybe explain why we're following the staff suggestion, but ultimately it does need to come back and be reworked. Thank you.
So next I see a comment from Commissioner Buchers. You have to unmute.
Thank you. I'd like to reinforce what the comments that Commissioner Boyce and Commissioner Lewis have just made, that I would like us to be aggressive on this. I'm really concerned about passing this in an unconditional fashion in line with the comments just made. And I do not want to leave this as an open-ended, come back to us when you can. So I'm very much in support of an affirmative letter. If we create some timeline and have them tell us no, that's not possible, rather than no timeline, then I'm for that as well. But I'm in support of the comments just made as to the problems with just approving this on an unconditional basis without expressing clearly our concerns. So thank you.
So the next comment is from Keith Niven. Keith, are you on the phone?
I am. I had to unmute. So good evening, Planning Policy Commission. Nice to see you guys. It's been at least 4 months, when it seems like longer than that. So Evan is really nice, and I'm going to come in and be a little bit more real in terms of existing resources within the city. So as you know, every city department had layoffs. There's mandatory furloughs, and I think it's great that you guys are passionate about this and want to make sure that there's some amount of predictability for this topic to be discussed publicly, and not to just have it open-ended and never revisit it again. But I just want you all to recognize that an expectation that something will happen this calendar year is probably not realistic, given reduced staffing resources, reduced consultant resources, and the fact that Public Works already has a full work plan for 2020. So I just wanted to be the downer of the evening and just share that with you guys as you figure out what you want your recommendation to be.
Understood. I don't see any more questions or comments in the chat room. Does anybody else have any input? Would anybody like to make a motion?
Hang on.
Madam Chair, excuse me, this is the Deputy City Clerk. It looks like Mr. Fall has a comment or question.
He does?
For Keith, Madam Chair, thanks. Keith, thanks for being such an awesome real person. So what do you think would be a realistic time frame?
So I think the question for you all is, you know, in the kind of in the ladder of priorities, where would this fall? You've got a brand new board. that's being put together. And I think that was a great observation that, it's going to take them a few months to get their legs underneath them and kind of get their charge and start getting priorities. But I think the council would react well, maybe to a recommendation that this would be one of the early priorities for the environmental board to maybe put on their docket. I don't know, my guess is they're going to have some things that are already stacking up, even though they haven't been formed yet. But putting it on for something, I can't speak for Public Works. I don't know if Evan and Interim Director York is actually in the meeting. So if Bob wants to join in, whether or not there's any room in their work plan for 2021 to kind of revisit the floodplain code, I don't know. I can't speak for Public Works. How's that for a non-answer?
Well, in today's, the way things are going today, it's probably the only answer that's really feasible out there. Nobody knows. We just hope. I think everybody on the commission just wants it done because everybody loves Issaquah and doesn't want it to flood and have all these problems. So we're just going to have to wait and see and hope and encourage you guys to do it as quickly as possible.
Well, and we put, there's a lot of other codes that have been put on the shelf for right now. I mean, Evan mentioned earlier 1810. So the land use code right now is on hold. I'm wanting to get that off the shelf as soon as possible. We've got an updated building code with higher energy ratings that needs to get adopted. So there's a lot of codes that we need to get through council. And, this one is, it's definitely gotten attention. And my guess is council will want a spot for it sometime in the near future. But you guys have the opportunity to, I think, craft whatever recommendation you want as far as kind of that second glance and when that happens. I was just trying to temper it and give it a level of priority and maybe not a deadline as a suggestion.
Thank you. So I will ask again, does anybody else have a comment or a question?
Joy, this is Kristen Leeson. It seems that Commissioner Lewis would like to make a comment.
Why aren't they coming up on my screen?
That's what we're here for.
Thank you.
You're doing such a good job.
Thank you. What I'd like to propose right now, although I do want to start out by saying that we haven't heard from Janice yet, and so if she would like to make a comment, I would love to hear from her as well. But right now, I think we're trying to strike a balance between trying to communicate our intent with trying to be realistic to staffing resources. So what I would recommend is the conditional approval. And again, I'm not making an amendment right now, Joan. I'm floating language to everybody to see how they feel. So this is, again, a comment so that it can be tweaked by everybody. But the conditional approval of the adopting the finding of fact and to the council that we, the commission, would like to have a dedicated resources put towards the continued revisions of floodwater management. We recommend 1, concrete work sessions to collect further feedback, and 2, the return of this to our 2021 docket.
I would maybe suggest that we make it separate from the motion, that we have a recommendation from you guys to craft such a proposal to the City Council.
I understand where you're coming from, and obviously if everybody else feels that as well, but since we are making a recommendation, I feel that my recommendation is conditional on this having somewhat of an open door and being able to acknowledge both the pandemic conditions of budget constraints we're in, as well as needing to be compliant with the NFIP. But for me, my recommendation, I should say, my vote to recommend the findings of fact specifically to the council is to say that this is an unresolved issue that is not being specifically addressed right now. Again, acknowledging those budget constraints, acknowledging the time constraints for compliance with the NFIP. But so my language is conditional on purpose, and I'd love to hear from everybody else.
Would you also require or encourage a letter to be added to it? Or do you want to keep it strictly in the motion?
I would keep it in the motion, but again, I would love to hear from everybody else. From my perspective, it's a conditional approval, and again, I don't have a time frame in here, but what I do have is the recommendation of concrete work sessions to collect further feedback and the return of this to our 21 docket, which enables the council to direct as they see fit. Again, this is our recommendation.
Do I have any comments from any other commissioner?
Commissioner Carl would like to make a comment, and then Commissioner Fowl.
This is Janice, and thank you very much. Actually, what I was going to add was pretty much summated by Joy's thoughts. I do agree that it should be a holistic statement to council that we see this in some way, shape, or form prioritized for 2021, given
You are cutting out.
the constraints that we're facing.
Janice, this is Tisha. You were cutting out a bit. Might I suggest you try turning? Try turning your video off. Try turning your video off. It will increase your connection, and hopefully we can hear you better.
Okay, I endorse the idea of making a holistic comment back to council. Okay, never mind. That's enough. Thank you.
Commissioner Boyce, do you have a comment?
Commissioner Fowl did.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, ditto to Joy. I think she did an outstanding job. And if she turned that language into an brain fart. Motion, thank you. I think that would be great. I think it would move. Thank you, Joy.
Okay, I will go back to a comment from Commissioner Buchers.
While I am supportive, as I've already said, the idea that this should not be an unqualified approval, I'm concerned about a condition that we are not sure can be satisfied, and we now are trying to define what that condition should be without really knowing what's possible. If we attach a condition precedence called to a motion, I'm not sure what that does to the motion if the condition precedent can't be satisfied. So that's a legal question. Unless that can be answered satisfactorily, my suggestion is to separate the motion to approve with the commitment to write a letter to council expressing our thoughts. So if somebody can answer the question whether or not a condition precedent, the terms of which we're not sure can be satisfied and may need to be revised, whether or not that in fact might cause some problem with the actual approval of the insurance of the language as stated. If somebody can answer that, then great. But otherwise, I express a concern there from a legal perspective. Thank you.
I can jump in real quick as to say that legally, it's the council that passes this to make sure that we're in compliance. We right now are purely advisory to them, and I'm sure that they appreciate our opinion, but it's not up to us. And so what we decide here tonight won't have any bearing on the compliance with the NFIP.
Kristen, were you planning to say something?
This is Kristen. I think Joy summed it up in that you make a recommendation, but council doesn't necessarily have to go with your recommendation. So if that's something that you want to include in the findings and as a part of your recommendation to council, you may do that.
Jason, would you like to make make a comment?
Sure. Thank you, Chair. So I actually was actually more in line with Commissioner Bucher's, not thinking that they actually needed to be tied to one another. However, if council, it's not necessary for them to heed our advice. My concern is I do take Mr. Niven's point that basically there are a lot of priorities that the city unfortunately are just not going to be able to come around to. Unfortunately, 2020 is looking like a wash already. So I don't want to put any undue burdens on something. I would like to send them a message by all means, but if it's simply just a recommendation, then I have no problem saying from the Planning Policy Commission that this has some teeth. So I'm okay with that.
Any other
I'm
comments?
okay with putting it into the motion.
Okay. So, Joy, would you like to make a stab at crafting the motion so that the secretary can put it into the minutes?
I will. I'm going to go ahead and read back what I said before, and I'm going to go ahead and see if somebody wants to second it. We, the Planning Policy Commission, give our conditional approval to adopt the findings of fact as stated. We asked the council to dedicate resources towards the continued revision of floodwater management. We, the Planning Policy Commission, recommend the number one, the concrete work sessions to collect further feedback, and two, the return of this to our 2021 docket.
I'd like to second that motion.
Are there any other questions, discussions on the motion? Hearing none, I'm going to ask the secretary to call the roll.
Can you hear me?
So you will take your take yourself off mute and answer.
You're on mute again.
Susan, we can't hear you.
You're on mute.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so Buchers,
Yes.
Carl,
Oops. Yes.
Fowl.
Yes.
Mr. Harrison is not by phone, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Lewis,
Yes.
Voice,
Yes.
and Probala.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, we will continue on. Unless I'm directed by staff for something else, we will go on to a presentation by the illustrious Kristen on the Old Town land use implementation and architectural standards. It is probably follow up on Robin's question about and Joy's answer about the council doesn't necessarily have to go along with what we say or we want. So there are some questions and updates from the city council meeting on Monday. So Kristen?
There are. Thank you. This is Kristen. It is good to see all of you. I'm glad you're here. So first things first, it's not in the agenda, but I would like to let you know that we are no longer the Development Services Department. We are now the Community Planning and Development Department, CP&D. So we'll get that on the agendas and so forth. Council made it official probably after the agenda went out. So the land use code amendments for Old Town, about 9 months after the public hearing, we got those through. Yay! But not all of them. So it was a partial victory there. The city council approved decreasing building heights in the cultural and business district, multifamily high, East Sunset Way only, and multifamily medium to 40 feet or 3 stories, whichever is lower. And in the single family duplex zone to 25 feet or 2 stories, whichever is lower. They also approved removing all receiving sites from Old Town. They approved allowing small scale standalone retail on East Sunset Way, and they approved requiring commercial for businesses on Front Street located within the cultural and business district. Things that were pulled before it went to council. One is the parking reduction incentive for neighborhood-oriented businesses. Both council and staff felt that that needed a little bit more clarification as to types of uses so that it wasn't so subjective. And then the other one was pulled, it was the impervious, increasing impervious. So that is going to rely on us being able to answer some of the council's questions once the surface and stormwater master plan is done, which as you just heard will be a while. So the neighborhood-oriented business parking reductions will come back to PPC. That will have to have another public hearing. The impervious surface will be able to go straight to council when we are done with that. The other one, the Old Town architectural standards, we continue to work on those behind the scenes. We are getting close to having our draft. And Keith Niven and I need to talk about when that's going to happen, but we would like to see that done by the end of the year. So that's where it stands.
Are there any questions? Are there any questions? Comments?
Madam Chair, if I could make a comment. So on the architectural standards, because it's been a while, I just wanted to remind you, we had a joint PPC DC meeting to kind of go through those initially. And then we had a pit stop with the city council and had a conversation with them. And then our next stop was to come back to a joint PPC DC meeting. So that would be kind of the next time you will see the proposed architectural standards for Old Town. So that we, as Kristen mentioned, we need to figure out when that wants to happen. It's confusing. It's all confusing.
Anybody else want to make a comment?
I'm going to jump in. I'd like to make a quick comment outside of the chat request. I'd like to mention that due to staffing and budget changes, we lost a dear member of our team. And I just want to give a shout out to our development manager, Trish, and tell her that we miss her. And it's weird not to have her, but we wish her all the best as she moves forward.
I second that.
Okay, can we do a formal proclamation and have us all sign it? So, Kristen, could you create something, 8 by 10, nicely done from the city? And if we ever get a chance to meet, maybe we could all sign it, but maybe you could just put our names on it and show us what it is and let her know that we do care and we do miss her.
Absolutely.
Cool.
I will do that.
So if there are no more comments on that from the commission, we are going to open it up to audience comments. And Tisha, is anybody signed up to make any comments?
I know that Connie Marsh was interested in making comments, and Connie, I've unmuted you from my end.
Okay, and I've unmuted from my end. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to tell you all what seemed to be happening with this environmental group that is forming, and the people who are trying to form it seem to want to have it be a committee with teeth. And so what was proposed by the city manager, Wally Bobkowitz, was that when the environmental group would make a recommendation, that recommendation would stand alone and come up along with whatever it is and go through the process all the way to city council. So that would mean if you all would get something that was environmentally oriented, you would get a standalone product saying what this environmental group's opinion was on that product. And that would not be something that PPC would be changing in itself, but you could add or comment on that, and then your comments then would go along with the environmental group comments to city council. And I'm having a hard time envisioning on how this would work as documents change and develop. And so I just wanted you all to ponder how you think that would work as PPC, and how we could make it so that we would get really awesome projects going through and processes going through in the future that have multiple voices, yet you would not have to be the harbinger of the environment. There would be another voice that would stand for that, so you could focus on other things. Do you think it's right? Do you think it's wrong? Are there other things? I think this group needs your opinions to filter in how the board is formed. I know it's going to council soon. And so if you wouldn't mind taking a look at that and putting a little bit of brain power to how you think that might turn out in reality, because this is just a concept and things are confusing enough already. But I would really appreciate that, because we want something that will actually work, not just maybe in theory work, okay? So thank you very much. Bye.
Tisha, is there anybody else that would like to?
No one else signed up in advance. I'll just ask, I do see we have one other caller on the line. I believe it might be Mr. Pereira. If you're interested in making comments, please press *3 on your phone and let us know.
Hearing
All right.
none?
Hearing none.
I'm just, since we haven't, I know this is really off topic, but we haven't been together for several months. Is there anything that you would like to update us on things you're doing, where you're going, where you see the city going? Any comments that you have? I know that's really off topic, but Keith, what's going on? Anything else in the city that's exciting that maybe we should know about?
Oh, look at the time.
Okay, I'll give you 1 minute, just 1 minute. Is there anything that stands out?
You know, I think I think that the last 4 months have really been the city kind of adjusting to working remotely. I mean, everybody basically packed up their stuff and went home. And the city had to keep on rolling, you know, and as we dealt with responding to the pandemic, you know, and that started to just kind of feel normal. And then we got kind of into the demonstrations, and that became kind of a new thing, right? You know, and so, and as that has kind of found its place, the pandemic is coming back. You know, cases are spiking. You know, the city's been doing a lot to try and help businesses. Jason, as you mentioned earlier, it's a huge concern over our local economy and our local businesses. I mean, you can't pick up the Seattle Times without seeing another, you know, local company like Sur La Table has just declared bankruptcy. So, you know, it's you know, we're not going to get out of this anytime soon. And I think what we're trying to do is figure out how to keep the community together during this. We've spent hours trying to figure out how we would open up a permit center in City Hall at some point when that makes sense. You know, everything is hard, and everything we're doing for the first time. We have a community conference with the Development Commission scheduled for next week. You know, that's because it's for the high school next to Providence Point, which you guys were party of all of that rezone. You know, there's a huge group of people that want to participate in that. So, you know, as we sat here and tried to juggle 2 members of the public for our commission meeting, I mean, imagine trying to set up one of these with possibly 60, maybe 100 people all wanting to potentially participate. So all of this stuff is kind of hard, and we're going to make mistakes along the way, but we're also trying to keep things moving, because there is a lot of work that just really sat for the last 3 months while we dealt with pandemic and demonstrations and keeping the city functioning and budget deficits. You know, all of that has taken a huge bite out of 2020. I think Jason said, you know, let's write off 2020. Yeah, I mean, I had big expectations, and right now I think getting through this year is my biggest expectation. So, you know, from a development standpoint, Costco's going vertical. You know, if you haven't driven by their headquarters in a while, they've got a garage that's popping out of the ground. They're about to get their permit for their 640,000 square foot new office building issued by the department fairly soon. Middle school in Tallis is under construction. If you haven't been by Tallis, that is now going vertical, coming out of the ground. You know, there's a Raleigh office building that's you know, being skinned right now, and Gilman Lofts. So basically, the first new office opportunity in Issaquah is got their temporary certificate of occupancy. So all of these things are great. They're all kind of happening in the background. But the city's trying to be nimble with all of this stuff, you know, trying to figure out ways we can help businesses expand outside with basically getting an over-the-counter permit, trying to break down some of those barriers so that our restaurants somehow survive this. So there's a lot going on in terms of just trying to keep the community engaged and moving forward. So that would be my update. You know, I think we're busier than ever. I mean, it's hard to believe, but you know, I've spent over 7 hours today doing these face-to-face video conference meetings. It's hard.
Yeah, and you never quite accomplish the same amount of work when you're not together. It's just, you know, it's just really hard. So I think we all understand that the whole staff is trying the best they can. And I appreciate what you just said. And, you know, we're here to support you in any way we can. So we love the city and we want it to grow and continue and certainly get back to business the way it's supposed to be. So if nobody else has a great comment.
I've got a comment. Jason and I are on the Issaquah Recovery Task Force.
Nice.
Do you want to update us on that?
Don't really have anything to add to it. I mean, it's supported by the mayor, and what we're doing is today we had Village Theater on, and we had the zoo. So Cougar Mountain Zoo was on there, and they were telling us about their businesses and how the struggles that they're going through. And the Recovery Task Force is working with the mayor to try and come up with out-of-the-box ideas on how to help the city recover. One of the things that came out of the Recovery Task Force was closing down Front Street. I think that I'm not sure exactly if that came from a comment from the community or a comment from within the task force, but it kind of came through that whole channel, and that's how that materialized.
Well, I need to give a shout out to Dia because that was one of their big pushes. Did it work? Was it successful?
My understanding is it was very successful. We're putting it on a 2-week pause because of the uptick in the virus. So, I think the businesses really enjoyed it. I think the response from the community was great. The only reason you're not going to see it maybe for another week or two is concerns over gatherings.
So everybody go wear your masks and let's get this virus taken care of.
Somebody kind of told it to me kind of like it's an accordion. It's a little bit of open and close, seeing what works, trial and error, kind of to Mr. Niven's point. There's no playbook for this. The last playbook was written 102 years ago. So it's really just, again, trial and error, see what works. The streetery was great. I heard that the numbers for some businesses were up to like triple. So that was great, but unfortunately, King County Health with the spike that's going on, time to close it a little bit, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, but we're looking forward to the future.
And we're very thankful for all the help from city staff to keep us running. We know that it's tough on everybody, and being able to keep us moving and keep these gears, even if slower moving, is really heartfelt and appreciated.
So thank you. Okay, hearing nothing else, I want to thank you guys for putting up with my lack of communication in the beginning. Don't know what happened, but since there's no more business in front of the commission tonight, I'm going to adjourn the meeting at 8:16. Love seeing you guys.
It was good seeing you.